the first hire is always the most difficult one. And I hired my first member of staff around 2010. And that was, I just graduated from university. So I really spent those 4 years at uni kind of building the business to a level where I was like, I don't need to go out and find a job. You know, I was earning enough to live off. But then, of course, when you take on a member of staff, you're like, this is a huge risk because, well, initially you think it's a huge risk because, you know, suddenly you're not responsible for your own wages, but you've got to pay theirs as well. And like you just said, I think the thought of, oh, can we get someone else? You know, only I understand my business. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they start out, you know, it's like you do everything. You wear many hats. You kind of, I was the sales guy. I was the support guy. I was developing the software. I was building the website. I was doing the sales and marketing. So to get someone in to think, well, how can they possibly understand all these different functions? And I think the thing that to think about when you're, a bit of advice really, when you're thinking about hiring your first member of staff is look at what you do, what you're spending your time doing in your business that is preventing you from moving forward or generating the least amount of income or revenue. So it's taking up a lot of your time, but it's not actually really responsible for, you know, growing the business or generating revenue. That's kind of like the first hire you should make should be to kind of alleviate that pressure away from you as a founder.
Very well said, and thank you for delving deeper into that. And you mentioned before you had some rocky bumps. Not everything went smoothly.
Yeah.
From your experiences in entrepreneurship, what is one of your greatest failures or lessons learned, and what did it teach you?
That's a good question. I mean, like I've had a few businesses that just haven't worked. I started a company which was in an industry I wasn't that familiar with, I think, called CDNFI. And that was probably the biggest failure to date in terms of like I invested a lot of time and money in that business. You know, obviously by that stage I sort of started it probably 3-4 years after I started hiring staff, so I was maybe up to about 10 or 12 then. And you know, obviously the team spent a lot of their time developing a platform, and really we took it to market without, I don't think I'd fully understood the sort of the demographic that we were targeting, and really it just didn't work out. Like it was one of these, we ended up selling the business, but you know, it was probably really a case of just trying to scrape back some of what I spent on it versus like making a huge amount of money. So it was just, that was a catastrophic failure. And I think one of the things that I suppose I learned mainly was going into a market that you're completely unfamiliar with is kind of dangerous sometimes.
I think that's great advice. So you would say more research.
Yeah, and I think I was chasing something where I was like, rather than being genuinely passionate about it, I was thinking, oh, there's an opportunity here. You know, I just thought, look, there's clearly money here, but we probably marketed it wrong, and maybe we're a little bit late to market. But yeah, this was probably about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years back now. But yeah, I think that was one of those turning points for me where I sort of thought, you know, maybe let's not do this again.
I think you've pivoted to now doing something you enjoy, as have several businesses that you're happy with. You're smiling. I'm looking at you right now. You mentioned the growth into your teams, which is fantastic. But if you could learn a little more and pick one entrepreneur to have a conversation with, we could do dead or alive here, James. Who would you choose?
Oh, gee, one entrepreneur that I could have a conversation with. I think Steve Jobs. You know, he's fascinating. And, you know, again, when I was kind of grown, initially started my business in the late 2000s, you know, watching him on stage, like presenting the iPhone and the iPad, and you know, I was totally hooked in and becoming like this kind of Apple nerd. And before that, I used to use Windows when I was kind of growing up. And you know, I think he was watching him shape Apple in that period between like 2007 and maybe 2010. Like that was a huge period for change, and a lot of people got on board with Apple then. And I think that was really fascinating. So Steve Jobs is probably one of those people.
Yes,
I just feel like it was just such a shame that he left us so early, really, you know.
When you look at his video clips and you look at the inspiration that he shares and how he approached life, I also, of course, try to adapt some of his teachings.
Yeah. And just his ability, like to present, like when you see that presentation of how he explained the iPhone, and because the device was something that people had never really seen before, how he broke it down into something that's kind of completely, it was understandable, it was relatable, and immediately people just thought, okay, we completely see what this device is for and the benefits it brings. You know, that's a masterclass in kind of sales and presentation, I think.
Just looking at him, I couldn't agree more. Let's look into the future here, James. We're going to go 1 year and 5 years out. I'm excited to hear about all of the growth you have in mind. Let's talk about 1 year from now.